From Square 2, this is What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO at Square 2, and along with my longtime friend and business partner Eric Kalis, this show answers the question many CEOs, CMOs, CROs, and business owners are asking, what's wrong with revenue? New shows drop every Thursday morning. You can find the video version of the show on YouTube at the Square 2 Marketing channel, on our website at the What's Wrong with Revenue page located in the footer, or on our free streaming service Square 2 Plus, both located at square2marketing.com. You can subscribe to the show or subscribe to Square 2 Plus, and we'll email you new show content as soon as it's published. You can also submit questions to the show on the What's Wrong with Revenue page of our website. Eric and I answer questions every single episode. You can also find the podcast version of the show on all your favorite podcast platforms. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, Mike Lieberman. Welcome to What's Wrong with Revenue, Season 2, Episode 11. Today we're going to talk about how a system like a revenue generation system can help you actually set and manage your budget. Hey Eric, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. So let me get the housekeeping out of the way. Remember, you can check out the show on YouTube. Square 2 Marketing has a YouTube channel. Go check it out. You can get all of the What's Wrong with Revenue shows on YouTube. Leave us comments, like it, and you can subscribe there as well. The show is hosted on our free streaming service, Square 2 Plus, located at square2marketing.com/Square2PLUS. All of Square 2's audio and video content is there, including all of the What's Wrong with Revenue shows in its video format. We have channels for CEOs, CROs, CMOs, and even a technology channel for all you HubSpot fanatics. Go check it out. The show also has its own website page called What's Wrong with Revenue. You can get it at the bottom of the Square 2 Marketing website. In the footer, click on What's Wrong with Revenue, and you'll get all access to all of our latest shows. You can subscribe to the show. We will email the show on Thursdays. We'll even give you emails with upcoming show information. And you can also ask questions right there on the page, and Eric and I will answer them here during the show. So, like I said, we're going to kick off our show today talking about how a system helps you set and manage your budget. And literally every single week when we're on the calls with other business owners and CEOs, and we're asking them about their budget for marketing initiatives, fortunately, 90% of the time, the answer is no, we don't have a budget, which is still shocking to me. But after 20 years, I'm going with it. They have no budget. They have no idea what should be budgeted to help them with their revenue generation activities. This is a huge challenge, the one that should be relatively easy to fix. So in this episode, Eric and I are going to talk extensively about how a revenue generation system can help create an appropriate budget for you based on your goals. It'll help you manage that budget and how it will ensure that you get full value from your money invested in revenue generation activities. And in the show today, we want to cover a couple of important points. How a system like RGS helps you align budget with goals and expectations. I think that's a big one. A lot of people wonder, well, if I spend this amount of money, what should I expect from it? And I think that's also why a lot of people don't set a budget for marketing, is because they're not sure really what to expect from the level of investment. We're going to talk about how the system helps you manage your budget. Obviously, if you're setting a budget, you want to manage to it. How a system helps prevent from going over budget. How to focus your investment on the most important activities, which means prioritizing and using metrics to do that prioritization. And how to use the system to continuously update and adjust your investment expectations. Most businesses do change over the course of a year, and it's possible your budget has to adjust accordingly, either up or down, depending on business conditions. And we'll talk about how you can use a system to do that. And last but not least, I want to circle back to a concept we talked about in Season 1 called the revenue cycle model, which literally will help you set expectations and align your revenue plans with the budget you decide on. So Eric, a lot to cover today. Give us some opening comments, and then we'll dig into it a bit.
Well, your comment about in 20 years, we've never met a client who had a budget. It's not really true. I think that people don't know how to create a sales and marketing budget, which is why they either wing it or ignore it. Lots of times I hear through speaking engagements or business meetings, yes, we're using 1% of our revenue as a budget. And that's pretty much the standard methodology for defining a budget. But if you're a $10 million company and you have a 1% budget, okay, that's $100,000. But if you're a $1 million company and you have a 1% budget, now you only have $1,000 to spend on marketing. So the budgeting of a percentage of revenue is, incomplete at best.
Also old. I mean, that's really an old school approach to figuring that out, and not really connected to what else is going on. If you're a fast growing company, you're going to want to spend a lot more than 1%.
That's exactly right, which is why I'm shocked when people still fall back on that. Like, I heard I'm supposed to use 3% of my revenue. No. And then I just basically talk them through it, because it's just picking random numbers, which is why I think your comment is so poignant about, like, nobody knows what to do. They have to work backwards, right? Like, what are the goals and what do I need to do to get those goals? And where am I today? And where do I want to be? And what's the delta between the two? And how much investment is that going to take? Which is an exercise that few people understand or embark upon, which is why they don't have a solid answer when we ask them, what's your budget? Now, sometimes we do get something along the lines of, our team has carved out $200,000 to pilot this program. And it's up to me as the business unit manager to make this work in the next 12 months. And I need you guys to build out the sales and marketing part. All right, at least that makes sense, that they've allocated or carved out some money for a test or a pilot program. At least that is a defined budget. And it's not 2,000, it's 200,000, because they know that there's a lot of work to be done. But really, when it comes down to it, there are so many factors at play. What's your sales cycle? What's your average engagement size? How many people are associated with the buying journey? What's the value of doing business with you, right? All of these things have to be inputs in the budget in order to come up with something that you could grab put your arms around from a monthly basis. And then there's the problem of, okay, I got a budget of $10,000 a month. What the heck do I spend it on? Should I just do social media? Should I create a lot of content? Should I do the same thing every month, different things every month? Like, nobody knows what to do in order to create that buyer's journey that enables you to scale and replicate some of the things you're doing now to really take your company's revenue growth to the next level.
Yeah, it's a very personal, I mean, when I say personal, I mean like business by business conversation. Like, just because your buddy's $10 million business is spending $150,000 a year on marketing doesn't mean your $10 million business should be spending $150,000 on marketing. It has, like I said, a lot to do with how quickly you want to grow. It has a lot to do with your industry and how competitive it is. It has a lot to do with where your stage of your business might be. If you're at the back end of a long career and you've established yourself, you might not need to spend that much. If you're early in your career in your business, or your business is early in its life cycle, you might have to spend more. So it's a very kind of individual question that is not easily answered by Googling what should my marketing budget be, which I think a lot of people would prefer if that was how you did it. I'm much more curious, because we've been talking about this all season long about a systems approach to this. So I'm much more curious about how a system like RGS would actually help you come up with your budget and then align it with goals and expectations. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit more of a shorter term view on budgeting that really helps people. Okay. So I just went through this exercise with an RGS client. We were doing 30-day sprint planning, and we came up with 3 big initiatives that we'd like to complete in the next 30 days. So when you went through the granular details of each one of those initiatives, there were some outside resources needed in order to do that. And you had a fair share of the internal team's time being taken up doing that. All of that contributed into whatever the quote unquote 30-day sprint budget was going to be. Now, it came out to something like $3,000, right? A couple of outside resources and the time that it takes to do it internally. So then the question is, well, should we invest $3,000 in the next 30 days to have us get these outcomes that we're looking for? And if we all agree that the outcomes that we're looking for are the things that are going to drive revenue, well, then it's like a different question. The question is, how do I come up with the $3,000 I need in order to do this? Do I tap my line of credit? Do I dip into my profit from the month before? Like, that's a whole different conversation than setting your marketing budget. And through 30-day sprint planning, by definition, because there's different projects every single month and different prioritizations and things going on the calendar, like, the Christmas holidays, let's say, the budget changes every single month. So that once again, it's another compounding factor of how hard it is to budget, because you can't just say 3,000 a month, 36,000 a year, and we're done. If you determine through your work that, oh man, it's really critical. And I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that came up was, this is a medical oriented business, and they do not have the capability to do text messaging as a connection to their clients via communication. And we had a very nice and strategic conversation about, where are they as a competitor if they don't have text messaging as one of their communication tools. The end result was, we are going to be perceived as old school, not cutting edge, or whatever the adjectives we used were. And we decided as a team that leaning into text messaging and adding that to the communication package for patients would be worthwhile. Now, the next question is, how do we get to text messaging? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to implement it? Which invariably there are going to be some expenses related to that. But what's the difference? If we say to ourselves, if we do not implement text messaging, it's going to put us behind the competition. We won't get our fair share of new clients. We won't be able to grow revenue to the expectations we had when we set the original annual goals and objectives. We must invest in that. Now it's like, where do I come up with the money to put in the text messaging? So the whole point here is that by being strategic and saying what is going to move the needle the most and prioritizing that in your 30-day sprint planning, now it becomes a little easier to put aside money, because the tasks that you're doing are mission critical. They're not just nice to haves.
Right. That's a really good illustration on how to kind of manage the budget and set and kind of work within the budget every single month based on things you're actually going to be doing, initiatives and campaigns and things like that. So if I was going to apply this for a whole year, do I have to think through 12 scenarios like you just illustrated to get some idea of what an annual budget might look like?
I think the answer in a very wishy-washy way is yes and no, right? You got to go through it to get a feel for it, but you don't have to do what it says. You could postpone things and move them around. So it's a little bit wishy-washy.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make is, let's fast forward. So I know it's March, almost April, but if I'm going to fast forward to November and I'm looking at 2024 and thinking about a budget for, revenue generation, which includes marketing, sales, and service, we could do something similar to get kind of an idea, like, well, the first quarter, I want to accomplish these things. The second quarter, I think I want to accomplish these things. Third quarter, I think I want to accomplish these things, and so on through the fourth quarter. And, you might know what your internal staff looks like, and you might know what some of your ongoing expenses are going to be. For instance, in your texting example, if they are subscribing to some kind of platform, they're going to have to pay for that next year also. So you can more or less come up with a pretty rough idea of what your 2024 budget might be by doing what you said. Now,
oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you were saying. Yes, of course, you can add them all up.
right,
And you can even throw 10% on the top as a buffer,
Right.
or just in case kind of stuff.
right,
You
right.
could
And
even
then
you could delete the month of December because nothing gets done on the Christmas holidays. You can play around with that.
yeah, and you might even say, like, look, here's what we accomplished in 2023 with 2 people. I really think we need a third set of hands, so we're going to hire someone else. We're going to put that in the budget. They might have aspirations to do a particular kind of campaign that maybe they've never done before, so they're going to put some money in the budget to bring in an expert or somebody to help them with some of that skill that the resident team doesn't have. And then they can apply your 30-day sprint planning overlay to that in 2024 to kind of evaluate what was planned, what planned to execute, and plan to spend. And then every single month kind of align like what's actually going on and what they're planning on doing with what they were expecting to spend and what they thought they would do. How does that sound if someone is trying to tackle this for the first time?
Yeah, it sounds smart, but it also leaves room for flexibility when things come up. Like, hey, we don't have text messaging. We didn't think about that last year. This is going to be mission critical. How are we going to do it? All right, let's fiddle around a little bit with the budget. And I think that's reasonable. But you see how, like, we're talking through this. I don't think that a lot of people understand, like, oh, we can approach it in a very flexible and nimble way that each month or each quarter is all we have to decide upon. And honestly, if I'm leadership and I'm saying last year we spent $10,000 a month for a total of 120. You know what, revenue team, do whatever you want. Just don't spend over 150 next year, assuming we're going to get similar results, right? Now, oh, okay, well, I got $12,000 a month to play with. I know December I'm not going to spend it, so that makes it $14,000 a month. Boy, I could do a lot with $14,000 a month in my budget, right? And maybe we even have some change left over that we could apply towards future months. If we have a couple of $500, bills we were able to save here, we did something internally and save $2,000 there. And then maybe we can implement a whole new campaign that we didn't account for in our annual plan. So yeah, I like the flexibility of what you just said and the quick staccato bursts of planning 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, as opposed to just planning it once during the year and working off a traditional marketing plan.
Well, I think most of the problems with the annual budget planning around marketing is it's not a great degree of detail that goes into it. Like your quick back and napkin, I think, is more likely what people do. Like, well, we spent this amount last year with no rhyme or reason, right? And God knows what's in there. I mean, there could have been, Phillies tickets in there, right? There could have been all kinds of non-traditional marketing or sales related expenses in the budget. They're just looking at a line item in their financial management system and saying, this is what got allocated to marketing. I think what we're recommending is a more thoughtful approach to what might happen in an upcoming year. And by the way, I don't think you have to wait for 2024 to do this. You could do this going into any quarter, and you don't have to do it on a monthly basis. You could do it on a quarterly basis. What are we going to try to accomplish over the next 3 months? What do we think that's going to cost us? Where are the internal costs? Where are the external costs? Where are the tools costs or, media costs or whatever it is we're trying to do? And before you know it, you have a budget. So I think it's a much more thoughtful approach to trying to come up with a marketing budget, as opposed to what I think most people do, which is, and by the way, I want to talk about this as it relates to this revenue cycle model, which would put a greater degree of clarity into what we're expecting. So I think that's the biggest question is, like you just said, well, we spent 120 last year, let's spend 150. I think most people would actually want to know, well, what am I going to get for my extra 30? I think that's hard to answer.
Not tactically, but investment.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Oh, I said, not what am I going to get tactically, like 3 white papers to 2 tip sheets, but what is that going to generate in revenue for me if I spend the extra 30?
Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Right.
Yeah, got it.
So, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of conversation generally about, expected results, which I know this revenue cycle model concept was the last thing on our list to talk about today, but I kind of feel like that should be the first thing when you're looking at a budget, right? Like, where are we today, right? We're getting these amount of visitors, which are turning into these amount of new contacts, which turns into this amount of leads, turns into this amount of sales opportunities. We do these many proposals, we get these many clients out of it for this amount of money, right? Everybody should probably be able to back of napkin those numbers. If you can't, give us a call, because you should be able to do that, like highest level. And you know exactly what you're spending today to produce these kind of results. So, you and I had this conversation a month or so ago. I had asked the prospect, well, how many new customers do you want to get a month? I think everyone also has a pretty good idea. Oh, we're getting 2, we'd really like 5. Okay, great. So if the goal line is 5, here are the numbers we need to go along with 5. And now let's back into the budget that's going to support that, right? So if we need to double the amount of visitors we're getting to get to 5, okay, what are the tactics required to double the visitors to the website? Maybe that's not the best way to do it. Maybe you only need a couple more visitors, but you need to double leads or double sales opportunities or increase your close rate. Like, wherever you're going to manipulate the metrics is where your money should follow. And it will give you a much better game plan towards what lift needs to be delivered. And then I think the marketing and sales team could probably talk about what resources and what tactics and what campaigns and what tools are required to deliver the lift, and then what it's going to cost. How does that sound as a methodology?
Completely reasonable. The challenge is, so leadership has to trust the revenue team to do that calculation, as you so elegantly described. And then they have to have the flexibility that 1 month, maybe the revenue team needs to spend $9,000. And then the next month they only spend 4,000. And then, oh, we got a conference coming up, so we got to spend 12,000, but Christmas time, we're only going to spend 3,000, and it's all going to work out in the end. I think what people traditionally calculate is the same amount each month, which then negates the 30-day sprint planning, because if these are the things we need to get to our goals, we got to do them right now. Well, you might have to spend a little more here and a little less some other time down the road. That's where I think people look, their people might be a little confused, because they're like, well, you know, we have an agency, the agency costs X amount a month, and then we have the salaries, and that's it. No, that's not it. If we decided that a specific landing page on our website would generate that many more leads at a conference that we decided to sponsor midway through the year, we got to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
It's interesting. It's interesting. It never really occurred to me, but it's kind of like your family budget, right? Like you don't spend the same amount of money every single month. Like if you're taking a vacation, like it was planned for, and your expenses are going to go up that month. If you're doing projects at home, your expenses are going to go up that month, but you planned on a kitchen remodel at the end of the year. If you're hosting a party, your expenses are going to be up that particular month, but you planned on having a party and you had some idea what the party was going to cost. It's really the same. I think businesses need to maybe take a little bit more of an approach that gives them the authority to be flexible each month based on what's going on, as long as they're sticking to the plan, what they've agreed to in the beginning of the year, and more or less what they thought it would execute. Look, you plan a party, you go for the big shrimp instead of the little shrimp. Maybe you spend a little bit more than you thought you would, right? But still, you're going to be in the ballpark.
Yeah. And if the outcome is I'm going to have the best party on the block, well, then maybe I need an extra bottle of liquor and some more popcorn. And you know what? I'm going to get someone to valet the cars. You know, if that's my goal, then I might not have anticipated some expenses. Or my friend says, oh man, I could get a singer the last minute. That would be amazing. And we didn't account for the singer, but if our goal is to have the best party ever, I'm going to spend $1,000.
Right. And the goal in this case is to generate more leads, more sales opportunities, and ultimately more customer revenue. So yeah, it does seem to align.
Yeah, but it's also hit the number. So if I'm going to need to put a little extra juice into my program to hit the number, I'm going to do it, because if I don't hit the number as the revenue team, then the company doesn't hit its annual goal, that we can't do some of the other things like buy a new machine or hire an extra person or whatever. That's a shame, because it all comes back to you must hit the revenue number every month from the budget to let the rest of the company be able to spend the money necessary to do their initiatives.
Yeah, it all makes sense. And I think it's some really good practical advice for companies that maybe struggle a little bit in terms of coming up with their expectations and then aligning their budget to those expectations. So let's circle back to the system a little bit. So you talked about how the system kind of helps on a 30-day basis in terms of managing to your budget, because you're really talking about what work's going to get done in a 30-day cycle, and it's easy to track your budget on a 30-day cycle. How would the system prevent you from going over budget?
Well, that's where like the tracking and testing comes in, right? So if I say, hey, I'm going to spend $1,000 on paid campaigns this month, I'm going to spend $1,000 on an outsourced freelancer to create some content, and I'm going to spend $1,000 on social media, I know I'm spending $3,000 that month. But through 30-day sprint planning and quarterly strategic planning, I can say, am I on budget? And if I'm not, well, then maybe I have to take away something that maybe is lower performing that my metrics identified I could probably live without. So for example, let's say I have a outside resource on email marketing and my plan is to do it once a week, and I'm behind and I'm spending $2,000 a month on email marketing contractor. I'm like, I'm watching these email numbers and people are just using email less and less. You know what? I bet I could get away with 2 emails a month and save the $1,000, because I want to rotate that into something else. And that will prevent me from going over budget, because I manipulated or realigned my inside the budget number a little bit better or more aggressively. And I think that these conversations that you and I are having are not daily, weekly, and monthly conversations that most companies have. I was talking to a prospective client earlier today, and they said, well, yeah, we have a marketing meeting once a month. So I said, well, what's that all about? Oh, well, we just talk about all the stuff that we're doing and what can we do to get it done. Nothing strategic whatsoever. To answer your question, if part of that agenda was, let's review our budget, how much we spend, how much do we have left? Are we hitting our goals? What are some of the things we can cut? What are some of the things that we should double down on? Those are like strategic conversations around the budget that only come from the tracking and testing of some of the different tactical things and initiatives that you had and salaries of contractors. So it's really a live conversation that has to be done, I like weekly, of course, because RGS features a weekly revenue team meeting, but bi-weekly, but it has to have all the conversations. Resources, how's our strategy? What are our tactics, our campaigns? Do we have a investment in technology? All of those things have to be rolled together. And if you're managing those carefully, it will prevent you from going over budget.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's probably very likely that you would identify something that isn't going as expected, just the nature of the business. Not everything we plan and execute works beautifully. There's often things that don't work like we expected them to, like every practice in your company, and those have to be identified and either adjusted, optimized, or shut down after a reasonable amount of time. So, identifying those and then reallocating that is certainly going to prevent you from going over if there's other things that come up that you want to move that money to. I want you to talk a little bit about the meeting details in terms of where this particular topic might come up and how it would get addressed so that good moves can be made proactively without it becoming like a couple months of wasted budget on something that was not addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a great question. So I think it all starts with, the weekly revenue team meetings have a very specific and rigid format. And the second thing that you always talk about is data. We're reviewing our scorecard and we're seeing what's working and what's not. If we keep pouring into if we keep pouring money into a activity that's being managed and we just can't figure out how to make it work from an ROI perspective, well, then that immediately is a red flag that should be dropped down to an issue, and we should talk about it open and honestly. Do we want to continue investing in this or not? This is hurting our budget. This is hurting our return on investment calculation. So, for example, if you have been going to the same conference year over year and you looked at the stats from last year's conference and they expected 600, but 400 showed up. And based on that, you were hoping for 60 leads and you only got 9 and none of those 9 turned into revenue. If you were able to go back and say, hey, the data shows that this conference probably isn't a good fit for our current line of services, whatever, you could cut that. You could have an issue, discuss it in your IDS section of your meeting and decide to postpone it, skip a year or whatever. So it all comes down to data. For that first part, to identify areas that could be issues that you should be talking about, whether to keep leaning into an investment, altering it, optimizing it to make it work better, or getting rid of it completely. So that's definitely number one. Number two is, I think that when people have quarterly initiatives, so for example, if one of the quarterly initiatives that we wanted to start a referral marketing program, right? Very straightforward. We want to systematize and process that. And we never seem to get it going off the ground, and we kind of did it and we didn't, and it's an issue every single month because the person who's responsible and accountable for it can't get their act together, blah, blah, blah. Well, then that's a conversation like, hey, we budgeted for referral marketing this year. And I mean, the outreach, the templates in HubSpot, the gifts for people that sent us referrals. You know what? Let's just cut that because it's not working out. There's some way we can't get that done. Let's move that to a longer term issue and attack it in the next year. Those are all different things that come from those conversations that are built in to protect the budget. Now, it could go the other way too. If your data shows that you're expecting 5 leads from a paid campaign and you got 50, then the conversation is, we got to lean into it. It's working like crazy. We're going to go over budget here. What can we do to go under budget there? And that becomes another issue that you bat around for, 10 or 15 minutes in your weekly revenue team meeting. So, I think the answer is, and this is the long answer to your short question, Mike, is that over the course of the meeting, we have to make the issues available to us to discuss. Are we going to keep spending this? Is this going to go over budget? If we do go over budget, what are our expectations? How long do we let it go? What's the no-go date that we all decide we're going to shut it down if it doesn't work to protect the budget? And I think there's a big and here, cascading messages to leadership, right? The revenue team meeting wants to make these changes in the original plan. Hey, leadership, this is the why, and we want you to approve it. Because honestly, if you're doing a paid campaign that's getting 10 times the results you anticipated, I'd be the first one at the leadership team meeting making that an issue, saying we'd like to expand the paid budget because we're generating sales leads and our team is closing it. I know we said we're going to spend 150,000 on marketing and sales this year in the budget. What can we do to get it to 200 and then really put some gasoline on the fire?
Yeah, there's a couple of good points in there. We actually have a client that spent $500 on paid search in the first month and got $2 million worth of business. So, that's an example of somebody that should be doubling down on their investment on paid search. There's obviously people out there ready to buy, looking for products and services like theirs. It's a very good opportunity. I think the other issue is that, which actually circles back around to what we said earlier, and made me think about it with regard to the conferences. Like, sometimes your expectations and your goal for an investment might be just to show up and be visible. Like, it might be important. I'm not judging it. I'm just commenting. It might be important for you to be visible at your industry conference, whether you get any leads or 100 leads. You might say, this is something that's important to us. We have to be there. Our customers are there, our competitors are there, our whatever your reasons are, they're your reasons. I'm not judging them. That's perfectly fine. That to me justifies the expense. As long as there are solid business goals and expectations associated with what you're spending that money on, if it makes sense to you, then it ought to be part of your budget and part of your conversation. Just adjust your expectations accordingly. Don't go to a conference like that expecting to come back with a handful of leads if you're saying your main importance is to be seen, and to talk to executives at your, partners, or to meet your customers for drinks. Like, just go to that event with those as your goals and objectives, is to socialize with customers and to be seen and talk to our partners. Like that's why we're going to this. Those are our goals and objectives. That's the only alignment we're specifically talking about. Yeah, from Eric, in my perspective, it would be great if it generated a boatload of leads, but every business is different and every business has nuances to it that are important to you. And that just has to cascade down into your execution, and be clear to the team that that's what the expectations for that particular investment include.
Yeah, and that's why in the 90.io software, we have cascading messages built in, because this is a necessary thing to let the team know what's going on.
Right. All right. So along the same line, so we talked about going over budget and setting your budget. We also generally find that companies have much bigger eyes than their appetites, meaning they tend to want to do a lot more things than they can actually afford. So in a lot of cases with us anyway, we end up helping our clients prioritize the things they want to do and get the most important items into their budget first, so that they're optimizing their effort and their investment. So, Bert, how would a system help with the prioritization of the activities that are going to have to now fit into this new budget we help them create?
Well, I think your prioritization and biting off more than you can chew is a big statement that we should probably make a whole episode around, because every company is like, yeah, we'll get all this stuff done this month. And, 50% of it actually gets done. So I think there has to be.
It's not even about money. I find like it's more about people's own time and resources than it is money on a budget, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's one of the biggest things. They don't realize, like, oh, I'll volunteer for it. I'll say that I'll own this specific task, but then you got, everything else going on in the business also. So yeah, I agree. But what happens is in the 30-day sprint planning, which what of course ties back to the budget, we have to make a agreement that whatever we decide as part of this 30-day sprint is actually going to get done. And if it actually is going to get done, then the next question is just one of the 6 pieces of the pie for RGS is, what are the resources necessary in order to do that? So in that case, for 30-day sprint planning, we're like, these are the things we must get done. We could probably do half ourselves internally, but we must outsource the rest or use our contractors or an agency or whatever. How much is that going to cost? How much can we build in? Blah, 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 blah. Because that kind of like honest thing, like we won't be able to get this done ourselves, but if we don't, we're going to fall behind on our annual plan. We must put this into the monthly expenditure column. I think a lot of companies are not set up to move that quickly. by saying, all right, I'm going to, we said we need this white paper for more conversions on our website. I'm going to outsource it to the writer that we have already known and vetted a couple times. I'm going to get a quote by tomorrow morning. We're going to get that approved by leadership, and we're going to spend the $1,200 to get this white paper done because it's part of our plan. That kind of like balancing of resources and getting approvals on the fly is not typical. Most companies take a lot longer. Before you know it, you're halfway through the month and you got the approval, and now you're not going to hit the month anyway. So key 30-day sprint planning, at least 2 weeks before the beginning of the next 30-day period, where that's a calendar month or not, is good, because you need a little bit of time to kind of get the team ready for the next one. And remember, they're still finishing the 30-day sprint from the month before. So like there's a lot of moving parts that have to be managed. I don't think companies are set up to move that nimbly.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to looking at your plan from a 90-day perspective too, because if you can look at it as 3 30-day sprints, even though they're not planned yet, you could potentially build in the lead time you need to get approvals on certain expenditures, right? Like,
Sure.
it's March and we're now going into April, May, and June. And if we have a pretty good idea what we want to accomplish at a high level in April, May, and June, I can start trying to get together those quotes and getting that expenditure approved now, so that it comes in April, and I have a week or two in April to start working on it, and I'm going to wrap it up in May. And I plan for that piece of it in April, and I plan for that piece of it in May. And everybody got what they needed. Everybody followed the proper steps, and we hit our 30-day, our two pieces of our 2 30-day plans, and we're still good for our what we're trying to accomplish in the April, May, June time period also. So, it's a good shout out to not only doing 30-day sprint planning, but also doing that not having that 90-day strategic conversation, so that you can kind of rise up a little bit over the chaos of a 30-day plan and what everybody's doing, and run around and get their plans done in the 30-day sprint, with a little bit of thoughtfulness around what might stretch over a month or 2 or even 3 months. If you're going to an event in June, you probably have to start working on it in April. So if you don't know about that, right, or before, if you don't know about that June event, if you're not talking about it, you might find yourself sprint planning in June for a June event and then end up ill prepared.
Yeah, ill prepared, right. And then ill prepared moves you to the next month. Now we're 1 month behind. Our quarterly objectives aren't getting done. You're right. It's a whole domino effect.
Right, which really supports the idea of trying to go into the year with this set up as much as possible, in terms of your process and your systems and your resources and your budget, so that you're not getting bogged down with some of these administrative things. Those are set and helping you execute, and everyone really gets to focus on the things that move the needle.
Yeah, I mean, even though this episode is about budget, it's also about value and priority, right? And if the team agrees that we're going to grow 15% this year on the top line, the question really is, before we engage in all these activities, is leadership dedicated to hitting that 15% number? And can we put the budget behind it if needed? Do we have a little bit of reserve, right? Have we anticipated if things work well, we could throw a little gasoline on the fire, as I said before, and really, accelerate what's going on? I think there's too much of marketing and sales is left as an afterthought. And companies, I think, are also too quick to accept less than stellar performance. And that's a shame, because once again, if we don't hit the revenue number, the rest of the company suffers. I can't buy that new machine that I promised my operations manager, right? I can't give these little swag gifts to everybody, at the Christmas party, right? And that's a shame, because if we're hitting the number, everything else falls in line financially.
Yeah, maybe you could comment a little bit on this. I feel like, look, I've been in marketing my entire career, so this is maybe a little personal to me, but, when times get tough, marketing generally has to shoulder the burden pretty aggressively, right?
Yes.
Right now, I would say times are uncertain. I don't know if I'd call them tough, but maybe we'll consider them uncertain. And I'm sure there are some companies who, to mitigate some of that uncertainty, are looking at marketing and saying like, maybe we don't need to spend the 150 we thought we would, right? How would you address that thinking in terms of this RGS system and everything we talked about so far?
Well, I mean, it's a dedication thing, right? We're dedicated to our revenue methodology. Let me turn the table just to make it a little clearer. Could you imagine in an economic downturn, a leadership saying, you know what, we're getting rid of our accountant. You know what, we're going to cancel our QuickBooks subscription. We'll just let it ride, right? It just doesn't work that way. But for some reason, like you said, historically, marketing is where the axe falls first, because for some reason it's not valued. Like, oh, you know what? We're not going to pay the electric bill for our manufacturing facility. We're not going to pay our rent. Like, none of these things ever come into question. But yet we are dedicated to becoming a growing company, and the first thing that gets cut is marketing, right? And or they fire a salesperson or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, in times of crisis you have to make dramatic cuts. But it would seem like in times of crisis, marketing wouldn't be cut. And I remember when COVID hit, we had that one client, Mike, and you'll remember, and they were like, look, we know it's going to end in a year or two. We're going to use this time to really take advantage of the downtime and build out our sales and marketing machine so that when everything turns, we're going to be the market leader. And I was so blown away by their long-term vision and their dedication to sales and marketing. And actually a bit jealous, because I think even in our own company, Mike, we might be a little like, we're just going to bet the ranch during a global pandemic that everything's going to work out fine. I mean, that was pretty aggressive, but also admirable, because they saw, hey, let's go for it. There's an opportunity here where our competitors are going to pull all the way back and we're going to forge ahead. That, in my experience, is rare.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you're going to follow traditional thinking and cut sales and marketing, you have to cut expected results as well. I mean, and I don't think people make that connection. I think, you know, it's not like they feel like they're giving up their growth objectives. They don't feel like they're giving up their desire to hit their revenue goals month over month. They're just looking at sales and marketing as this place where they can save some money without really impacting the business, right? To your point, if we don't pay the rent, we're getting kicked out of our office. If we don't pay the electricity, the machines aren't running, right? Like, well, sales and marketing, we can pare that back a little bit. And, you know, look, maybe it's a general lack of understanding, but I think most people feel like it will not impact the business dramatically, when in fact, we're here telling you that there's a direct correlation between what you invest in sales and marketing and what you expect to get from it from a sales and a revenue perspective. So cut it, but cut your growth objectives, cut your sales targets, cut everything back, because it's going to have a direct connection to how aggressively you're going to perform against those very important metrics. All right, one more thing before we hop off. Let's talk about, I want to mention to the audience how Square 2 does its prioritizing and how we do it with clients, because I think if you're in a 30-day sprint planning meeting and you have 8 things on your list of things to do and you can only afford 6, sometimes the question is, okay, well, what 2 don't make the cut, right? So typically what we're looking for when we go through this exercise with clients is what work is going to have the biggest effort for the least, the biggest impact, or for the least amount of effort, right? So, and then let's put those items on the list first. And here's an example. If I have a web page that is fairly highly trafficked and it's not converting as high as I think it could be, I could literally spend an hour making some adjustments to that page and generate additional conversions, you know, the same day, right? So for me, that would make the list, because it's a little bit of effort and a pretty big payoff. The more things like that you put in your list of things to do, and the more items like that you prioritize at the top, the better result you're going to get from your overall program. Now, there might be a big project, like write a big white paper, write it, design it, post it, share it, like all those things, and that might be a lot more expensive. It could take a lot more effort. And I think the results are hopefully there, but maybe not as clear as the landing page example. Like that might be something that you try to get in at the end if you have some room for it, or perhaps it's something that gets pushed to the next month because you have so many other things that you need to work on that are going to provide a bigger lift for less effort. So it's not always easy to use that methodology. And there are some things that you obviously have to tackle regardless of what the effort is. But if you're looking for a way to work through your items in a 30-day sprint planning exercise, and you're wondering how to get the most important features in or most important projects or tasks in, I would recommend you apply something like this to that. Anything to
Yeah,
add to that?
I was having a conversation with a prospect and they were like, we're doing 6 trade shows this year. We're going to spend $120,000 on those trade shows. I'm like, hey, do you do any referral marketing? They're like, no. I go, how much does it cost when someone refers someone to your business? They're like, nothing. I go, doesn't it also come with a built-in testimonial? Yes. Well, wouldn't that be a less effort, more return on investment if you asked your 1,000 customers to refer their buddies as opposed to just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars plus on a trade show? And it was like you hit them in the head with a sledgehammer. They were like, wow, that makes so much sense. That's so much less effort. And I could probably get a couple of good clients out of it each month. And when I go to this conference, nothing's guaranteed. So it was just like prioritization, least amount of work, most amount of results, like have that conversation. And also the plan that you put on the shelf that took you out 12 months that your marketing team created is obsolete in the first 2 months or so because of market conditions. Why even go through that exercise? It's much easier to be short-term oriented when it comes to 30-day sprint planning and getting that stuff done.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Great. Anything else you want to add before I wrap it all up?
Well, I think that, a lot of times people don't boil it down into simple terms that the whole team can understand, right? So let's say you're doing $10 million in sales and you really want to get to $12 million in sales. And you know that 25,000 is the amount that a good client spends. So if you know that if you have a $2 million increase divided by the 25,000 that a good client will spend in the first year, you need 80 new clients. And let's say you have a 50% close rate. You need 160 sales opportunities, and you might need a 3-to-1 ratio for lead to sales opportunities, right? Like this simple kind of back and napkin math. And like, oh, I need 500 leads this year to grow my company $2 million. Great. If there's 252 workdays in the US, that boils down to 2 leads a day. Now, all you have to do is say, did I get 2 qualified leads a day? But to do that math leading up to that, to help you with your budgeting and understanding what you need and what the effect is going to be from this investment is lost. Like I just gave you the whole formula right there. And if people are like, oh, I need 2 leads a day. Hey, everybody, it's 5 o'clock, time to go home. Did we get our 2 leads today? Yes, we did. Great. See you tomorrow. Oh, we only got 1 today. Tomorrow, we're going to huddle and see how we can get 3 the next day. Like that's simple kind of basic stuff. And that will help you hit the budget number, but nobody knows how many leads they need a day, a week, a month, a quarter. They're just kind of winging it.
Yeah, it's really good advice. And, for anybody watching or anybody listening, those kind of numbers, we help prospects with that all the time. In fact, I do revenue cycle models for almost every single prospect we talk to. So if anyone is interested in looking at these numbers for their business or having one of these models created for them, just reach out to either Eric or me, Eric@square2marketing.com, Mike@square2marketing.com, or go to our website and ask to speak with us about this kind of thing. It might actually provide a really different perspective on what your budget is supposed to do for you and what that budget number might be when you can actually see it on paper like that in a very quantitative way.
Well, you think about engaging the team. And we said, hey, everybody, we need 2 leads a day to hit our goal. It's so simple. But now come back to them, which we started today's conversation. Folks, we're spending 1% of projected revenue on our marketing, and we don't really know how to, allocate that. No. We're getting 2 leads a day. What do we have to do to get 2 leads a day? That's the question. So, try to keep it simple, boil it down, spend a little extra when you can, save a little more when you can. But it's an ongoing weekly conversation, not just a one and done for your strategic marketing plan.
Right. That's great advice. All right, great. Thanks. So thanks everybody for joining us for season 2, episode 11. Next week, we're going to do season 2, episode 12. What companies and what types of leaders are right for a revenue generation system? I hate to break it to you, but RGS isn't right for everybody. So we'll go into a great degree of detail into who really is the right profile to champion a system like this and help get a system like this installed in your company. We'll talk about that next week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Remember, you can get the show on YouTube at square2marketing.com's Square2 Marketing's channel on YouTube. Like us, subscribe, and leave us comments. All of What's Wrong with Revenues shows from season 2 and all of season 1 are on our YouTube channel. You can check out the show at square2marketing.com/square2plus, Square2 Plus, our free streaming service. It looks just like Netflix. We have channels for CEOs, CROs, CMOs, and we have a whole channel dedicated to HubSpot and other technology information there. Go check it out. It's full of audio and video content. We post something there pretty much every single week. And you can get it from the footer of our website. Just click on Square2 Plus. We also have a What's Wrong with Revenue page on our website, also in the footer, What's Wrong with Revenue. You can subscribe to the show. We will drop the show every Thursday into your inbox, and we'll even email you advance notice of upcoming shows. And we will allow you to submit some questions. A couple shows, Eric and I handle questions from the audience. Maybe we'll do some of those next week. So if you have any, drop them in there. We'll take care of them. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your week. Eric, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.